So, you want to buy an Xbox 360? Well, hopefully you've come to the right place. Hey, what's going on everyone? It's me, Mr. Mario, and this is a new series that I am doing here on the channel. So, expect maybe a few episodes a year or so, and each episode is going to be based on a specific system. This one, of course, being the Xbox 360. This series is not supposed to be a tutorial by any means, but this is supposed to engage anyone and get them interested and see if they're wanting to get an Xbox 360, what they might need to look out for, any differences with revisions, any types of gotchas they need to know, and any type of accessories, whatever it might be, needed to be purchased with this system. Now, on top of that as well too, this is not a buying guide, so to speak. As I said, I more want to talk about the gotchas, the systems itself, but don't look for game recommendations on here. I know there's several other YouTube channels that have buying guides and recommended games. I'm not going to be doing that. However, the way I'm going to be differentiating this is I'm going to be talking about the system itself for about the first half, and then normally the second part to this video, I'm going to be talking about the modifications itself, what modifications the system might have, what I might recommend, or anything like that. Now, this series is for anybody who is interested in picking up a Xbox 360. Yes, even in 2018. I'm well aware I'm making this video and releasing it in 2018, as well as anybody who's just generally interested in the system, or maybe you just want some edutainment right here. This video is not for people who are on newer systems or on PC and don't want to go back and don't want to go to a console. This is also not for people who are kind of waiting for emulation to become better and they don't want to really focus on the native hardware aspect on it. So I'm just letting you all know those are what the audiences are intended for this video. Now, as I said, this is going to be some edutainment for you all. There are going to be some highly technical things and terms that I'm going to mention on here, and for that I can recommend, if they are not clarified fully in this video or you're still not understanding them, please do your homework either on YouTube or Google or anywhere else and check and see what those terms might mean if you are looking them up. I'm going to do my best to explain them, but I might not explain everything. We'll just see how it goes. Now, if you're still kind of skeptical, you might be asking, who even cares about the Xbox 360, dude? It's 2018. Well, I'll answer. Apparently a lot of people. See, my top performing video this year, and actually on my channel overall, has been a Xbox 360 related video. Yeah, it could also be because of some GameStop hate, but here's the thing with it as well too. I've noticed Xbox 360 videos even in the past few years have still kind of gone up and have done well, so there is obviously interest there. I believe this is more because these systems are becoming nostalgic. I mean, the console's going to be 13 years old this year, whether we like to think about that or not. Kind of have to realize that. And on top of that, there are a lot of people that are laggards with this as well too. They might have completely missed out on the Xbox 360, or they were just on PS3, went to PS4, and decided to get a 360 because they are quite cheap, and it has a pretty solid library at this point as well too that you can get for a pretty good price. But I don't want to spoil that all too much. Let's go ahead and get into the system itself. Now, first of all, why would you want to buy an Xbox 360, one of these big pieces of plastic right here? Well, first off, they're cheap. As I said, you can get them pretty easily. I mean, they've made a lot of these consoles, and you can find them locally complete for $50 or less. They're also great multimedia machines. You see, thanks to this, you can use either component or HDMI to get 1080p output out on your system, and you can use Netflix, Hulu, YouTube, some of those streaming services, but even if you just want a cheap DVD player that can play some games on the side, this is a pretty solid option. A lot of games are getting liquidated as well. I know GameStop this year and even at the end of last year has really just completely stopped focusing on the 7th generation of consoles. So it's like, you know, Xbox One and PS4 are taking up all the space, next to all the toys and all that, of course. And then the Xbox 360 and PS3 sections are just extremely small and pretty limited. But that also means that the games are cheap, and there are a lot of great games that came out on this system. Not only exclusives, but also multiplats as well too, if you don't mind, you know, playing at a low resolution, low frame rate, whatever that might be. I know people are going to say PC Master Race, but look, a PC is not for everyone. Now, if you are in the market for an Xbox 360, you might be confused as to what model you should get. Well, first off, I'm going to cover fat models, which is something like this right here. Of course, they come in white and black, and there's other limited editions as well too, but in short, this shape and everything, this is what a fat model is supposed to look like. And when I refer to a fat system, this is it. If you are going to get one of these and you might save 10 to 20 bucks on it, I would recommend going after a Jasper motherboard, and you're able to look at the motherboard division and tell what it is on these fat systems thanks to the power plug right here. The reason why I say get a Jasper motherboard is because this is the final revision of the fat Xbox 360 motherboards, and I have to this date never seen a red ring of death on a Jasper motherboard that was caused to a general hardware failure. I have seen bad disk drives, I've seen bad power supplies, but as for something actually failing on the console, I myself have not seen it in person. If you do find something that might be a refurbished or red ring of death fixed Xbox 360, do not buy it. In short, that is asking for trouble. I can go into the reasons why, but that would take up an entire whole video. This is one of those times I would actually recommend go ahead and do your research on refurbishings and bolt mods and all that other stuff if you are so interested. But in short, if you see something that's been refurbished, especially by GameStop or EB Games or anywhere else, or just really any game shop, or it is something that is red ring of death fixed, stay away from it. Be warned though, if you do get a fat system, this model right here does not have Wi-Fi on board. It has Ethernet, but no Wi-Fi. So if you're putting this somewhere where you cannot easily access a Ethernet cable or plug it into a router or switch or anywhere else, you're not going to have a very good time. You're not going to get that far. You're really not going to get online with this. Yes, there is a Wi-Fi dongle that you can purchase. There is the one with a single antenna and the one with 2 antennas. If you have to purchase one of those, I'd recommend getting the one with 2 antennas. However, I wouldn't necessarily recommend this. The reason why I say that is because these dongles are quite expensive now at this point. I mean, they could be $30, $40, $50, and you can spend less than that upgrading to a Slim. If you do decide to get a Slim, which normally, again, you can get these systems for pretty cheap, but maybe compared to a fat model, you'll pay an extra $10 or $20. This is what the Slim looks like. Well, there's 2 versions of the Slim. There is the Xbox 360S, this thing right here, and the Xbox 360E, which looks like a cheapo bootleg Xbox One. I don't own any of those, fortunately. Now, the great thing about these right off the bat is that they do have Wi-Fi on board, so you don't have to worry about, oh, I can't hook up a really long Ethernet cable. You'll be able to play just fine, well, for the most part, as long as you have Wi-Fi. The reason why I say for the most part is because if you have a bad signal or bad Wi-Fi in your house, I mean, you're going to have to diagnose that yourself. That's not going to be an Xbox 360 problem. And when it comes down to this as well, there are 3 motherboard revisions of the Slim. There is the Trinity, the Corona, and I'm not going to include, you know, all 6 of the versions of Corona in there. I'm just going to label it as Corona, and Winchester. If you have to pick one motherboard, I would recommend getting a Trinity motherboard, as that is the easier one to mod and is more common out there. I'll mention that more at a later point in the video here. Now, one thing you might notice is some Slims and later revisions, specifically the Jasper versions of the FAT 360, might have some onboard storage. This could be 256 megabytes, 512 megabytes, or 4 gigabytes. Regardless of the onboard storage, I would highly recommend getting a hard drive. The main requirements for a hard drive are, first off, if you have any intention of playing original Xbox games on here through the backwards compatibility program, as long as they are accessible, you do need a hard drive, point blank, period. A second reason is some of the later games that came out in the Xbox 360's life cycle actually require you to do hard drive installs on them. So whether it's a partial install or a full disk install, you're going to have to do that. On top of that, I would actually recommend whenever you have games, pop it into your system and install it to the hard drive. That way, it's going to load faster, you're going to put less wear and tear on your disk drive, on your system as a whole, and your system will stay cooler and quieter. So really nothing but benefits for about, 5, 10, or 15 minutes of waiting for the disk contents to transfer over to the hard drive. Now, when it comes to the differences on the two, with Slim systems, they have Wi-Fi on them. As I said, they are quieter, they are going to run cooler, and on top of that, if you want to be a little eco-friendly, they also take up less power. So why don't I just straight up recommend that you get a Slim instead of a Fat? Well, Fats are going to be easier to mod, in short, and I'll get into that in the modding section of this. But again, if you never ever plan to mod your Xbox 360, the Slim is still a pretty good addition to get. Now, if you've noticed USB ports and you might have been wondering, well, why should I get an internal hard drive, or why should I buy a hard drive for the 360? I could just take a flash drive or take an external hard drive, and you can. That is true. Actually, with later updates in the Xbox 360's lifecycle, it allows you to use a USB drive up to 2 terabytes inside for use on the Xbox 360. 360. Now, the upsides are you can easily manage your storage and easily increase it that way, and you can still install games to your flash drive or your external drive, whatever you're going to use. Unfortunately, though, this is not going to bypass some of the restrictions as I mentioned with hard drives. If you want to play a original Xbox game, you have to have a hard drive attached to your 360. It can't be an external drive. It has to be an internal hard drive of some kind. On top of that as well too, there are some games where even if you take a 32 gigabyte flash drive of some kind, or you take a 2 terabyte external drive, there are some games that will just not install, or they are still going to require that hard drive for caching of some kind. So with this, I would recommend when you get a hard drive, get something like 60 gigabytes or 120 gigabytes in size. Don't mess with a 20 gig hard drive. Now, I also want to warn you all, for anybody who might be wanting to import games, that the region restrictions on the Xbox 360 are tricky, to say the least. You see, it was in this in-between generation here, where in the 6th generation of consoles, it was no, you get a NTSC-U Xbox, it can only play NTSC-U games. Now, in the 8th generation, the consoles are region-free, Switch, PS4, and Xbox One. The Xbox 360, it had region locking, but it was per game. And there's really no way of checking for that unless you look online and you research it, or if you rip the contents of the game and check it yourself through a third-party program on your computer. The reason why I'm mentioning all that, though, is because there are some games where they might be coded region-free, and they'll work on any 360 in the world. There might be some games that only work in PAL and NTSCU territories, or there might be some games that are only going to work in a PAL territory. Even some games had different releases. I know Army of Two was one of those, for example, where it had a NTSCU release and it had a PAL release, and both of them were region locked. It was different discs, while as something like Gears of War, for example, you can get the disc from anywhere in the world and it was region free. The reason why I mention that is because if you pick up a NTSCU Xbox 360, you're only going to be able to pop in NTSCU games and region free games. There's not going to be a modification out there that's going to allow you to region freeify the disc drive here. Even if you do the modifications that we talk about later, if you pop in a disc that's out of region, at least the last time I checked, it's still not going to allow you to play it. You're going to have to rip it another method and then play it if you have a modified system. Now, as a bonus, I keep talking about hard drives. I keep talking about backwards compatibility. What am I talking about here? Backwards compatibility is when you're able to play a older system's games on a newer system. So the Xbox 360 superseded the original Xbox, but it ended up getting backwards compatibility on a select amount of titles. So be warned that not all original Xbox games are going to work on the Xbox 360. There's a good amount that do, and even in that little pool of games right there, there's a certain amount of games that are going to give you issues on the Xbox 360. Some games will play perfectly, others are going to give you some issues. It's really a hit or miss type thing. What I'm trying to say on there is you do have that compatibility on the Xbox 360, which is nice and convenient if you want to play some select original Xbox titles that work through HDMI on one console. So now we get to the fun part, at least in my opinion. What if you get a Xbox 360 and you want to modify it, or you end up looking around to see if you can modify your system, or you want to get one pre-modded? Well, I'm here to educate you on that a little bit as well. Now, I'm going to have 3 different groupings here, and I'm going to explain each one of them. First off is retail, second is flashed, and third is hard modded. Now, the first one is extremely simple. Retail. What is a retail Xbox 360? It is a console that has not been touched, has not been opened, is completely stock. Stock drive, stock firmware on the system, everything. You've gone to the store, you've unboxed it, you've hooked it up to your entertainment center, and you're just playing on a stock unmodified console. It operates exactly the same as any other 360 you would get from a brand new or used game shop, as long as they're not doing any mods to them. Now, second category, what am I talking about? I'm talking about flashed systems. Now, for this, we are not doing a modification to the console itself. We are actually modifying the disk drive, and this is simply a disk drive modification. When I refer to a flashed 360, or someone says they have a flash 360, what they are talking about is they have a disk drive in their console that has had its firmware modified to allow you to play backed up or burned discs. Now, all this does is it just modifies the way your DVD drive acts. It's going to act the same as a DVD drive like any other one, except in this exception right here, it's going to allow you to play burned Xbox 360 games and burned original Xbox games. This does not unlock the region on your system. This does not unlock the region on the DVD drive. It does not change the functionality of your Xbox 360. Again, two separate modifications. I know people that look into older systems see that there might be mod chips and all that stuff. This is not a mod chip. Your system is going to work and operate like a retail system, but the DVD drive is going to be modified that will allow you to play burned and backed up games. If you're one of those people that's looking to run homebrew, this solution is not going to do the trick. So what good is this solution? Well, this is good, at least now in present day. One, if you want to back up and preserve your collection, so you want to get your games, back them up, burn them off, and play with the burned discs as opposed to playing with the retail and legitimate games themselves, so you can keep them all nice on your shelf. Or really, if you're just interested in the process here. I know there are several people watching this like myself who just find the tech behind this interesting and fascinating and just want to do the modification for the sake of doing it. This would work out for you as well too. It's fun to do and it's fun to learn, at least in my opinion. The other limited option that you could do with this is there are some games such as Call of Duty World at War where you can actually somewhat modify the game itself. And by that I mean there are some files on some games that you are able to modify the ISO itself. So you can rip the ISO of the clean game over to your PC. You can take some files that have been modified, swap them out, and then patch your ISO that way and reburn it. So that way you can then be playing a limited ISO modded version of the game on your system without doing a hard mod. The reason why I say this is limited is because yes, there are some games that you can do quite a bit through ISO modding, but it's pretty limited depending on what you're trying to do for the most part. If you want to just go crazy and do all these other crazy awesome hacks and modify every single game, you should be looking for a hard modded system. But if you kind of want to dip your toes in the pool, so to speak, I mean, you could try ISO mods as well too. Now let's say if you want to modify a console, this is why I was recommending the FAT360s if you're wanting to mod. You see, there are 4 variants of drives for the Fat Xbox 360, and all of them for the most part are pretty easy to modify. Aside from the light-on drives, those ones might give you a little bit of trouble. You're going to have to partially disassemble your drive, and you need something like this, such as a probe tool, in order to pretty much disable power, probe a certain point on the drive PCB, and then dump the key that way, which you can use to recreate your modified firmware and flash it back to the system. So the light-on is really going to be the only one that will give you issues on there. Aside from that, if you get any of the other 3, they're pretty easy to modify yourself as long as you have a proper configuration on your PC. Now we're going to look at slims as well too. What if you have a slim and you want to flash it? Well, this is why I recommended the Trinity console, because most Trinities came with the light-on 16D4S drive, which is the one that's the most moddable. Now there are 2 ways you can flash the disk drive on here if you have one of these, and it is directly dependent on what kind of chipset you have. One of them is going to require you to, again, use a probe tool such as this and cut a trace on the PCB. The other one is going to require you to drill your PCB. I said that correctly. You have to drill your PCB on your drive. So yes, these are much harder and much more intricate to do compared to the FAT drive. So if you're wanting to flash your console, you know you want to do that, or you see that in the future, I'd recommend getting a FAT system over a slim system. However, this is also more of a challenge, so if that's your thing, great. Now there are also newer drives on the slims. There are the light-on 16D5S drives, and on top of that there are also the Hitachi drives, and unfortunately there's no way to directly flash these. Essentially what you have to do is take a bit of a roundabout way. You see, you need to hard mod your system, retrieve the DVD key that way, then you need to grab a unlocked PCB board for that drive, swap it out, and then create a new custom firmware for that drive PCB and flash it onto there. You see, we're getting to a lot more steps when we go from slim and onward, so that's why I'm recommending, if you want to flash your drive, grab a FAT system. It's going to give you a lot less headache. Now, you might be wondering, how do you ensure that you get a system that has a light-on drive in it? Well, this is almost guaranteed a way to get a compatible 16D4S light-on drive on your slim system. If your manufacturing date is somewhere in July 2011 or before, most of the time you are good to go on there. There is a rare chance you might get a newer drive in there, or you might even get a Hitachi drive of some kind, but most of the time you're going to get a 16D4S if you have to have a slim that you want to flash. Now, some people might also be saying, well, this is stupid. I want to flash my drive. Can't I just go on eBay, buy a drive that's already been flashed with custom firmware, and drop it in my 360? No. You cannot. every single Xbox 360 has a DVD key that is paired to that specific drive. So really, that means if I pull the DVD drive out of this system right here and flash it, then I can put it back in this same system and it will work just fine and everything will be good to go. However, if I grab a drive from another system and install a custom firmware to that drive and then pop it into this system, straight away, that is not going to work. The reason why we need that key is because that is matched to the motherboard itself. So if you're going to swap drives, what you could do is you could either swap the PCB board, or you can take the drive key off of this drive right here and then flash it onto this one. But I mean, we're getting into a whole bunch of extra stuff. What I'm trying to say here is you cannot just swap drives all willy-nilly and crazy. It is going to require some extra steps. So short answer, no. You cannot go and buy a pre-flash drive and drop it into your system. It will not work. I guarantee you. Some people who are familiar with the scene as well might also be yelling at me that I have not mentioned optical disk drive emulators, or ODDEs or ODEs, such as the X-Key or the Wasabi 360. In short, what these devices are they're not really a hard mod by any means, but it is extra hardware that you have to add to your Xbox 360, and it intervenes between your system and your DVD drive. And at that point, it acts as a disk drive emulator. What these allow you to do is they allow you to then add this extra hardware, get everything all set up, and once you do that, you can then take your ISO files and put them onto a USB drive such as this, and then just pop that into your 360. Not in that directly, you have to connect it to the device itself, the ODE device, and then you can play games off there, which means you don't have to go through burning all of your games and all that stuff. If you back them up or you have the ISO files available, you can just copy them to a compatible USB drive of some kind, and you're all good to go and play. The reason why I'm not touching up on these is because I have never owned an ODE, I have never operated one, I've never messed with one, so this is something that I am aware of, and I know I feel like a good amount about, but I've never set one up myself, and I can't really give you any first-hand experience. I will say, though, if you have a 360 that you want to kind of keep and pimp out and do all this other stuff and unify in a way, that's not a bad option. These can normally be had for about the same price as a used Xbox 360. The last time I checked, I can buy an X-Key for about $60 or $70, which that's about what you would expect to pay for a used Xbox 360 right now. I know I also just said, earlier in the video you can get them for $50 or less. The reason why I was saying 60 or 70 is because that's normally kind of like the high mark. Like if you aren't going to Craigslist or you aren't looking on eBay, you're going to probably pay 60 or 70 or even more if you're going to a game shop. So that's kind of like the top tier of what you're going to be paying. But when it comes to ODEs, I would recommend doing your homework on that. Maybe that's the right option for you as opposed to messing with the disk drive and burning all your disks and everything. I will say though, this is not going to negate the need to flash your drive. You might have to flash your drive, and if you don't have to flash your drive, you're still going to have to grab the DVD key off there. So you're still going to have to mess around with your drive a little bit. Although I will tell you all this, it is immensely easier to do that on a Slim, because a Slim, all you need to do is just really hook it up to your computer and dump the DVD key. You don't have to do any of the other crazy stuff, so you're really good to go on that. Now, last question on this might be, is this live safe? I will say this. In my opinion, anytime you take a modified console onto the closed source network that is available for that system, whether it's a PlayStation or a Nintendo system or a Microsoft system of some kind, you're going to run the risk of a ban. You're going to run the risk of running into some type of trouble. I will say though, when it comes to iExtreme Light Touch firmware, ever since the firmware went to Light Touch, there has not been a case of the system getting banned because of the firmware itself. Extreme firmware has been detectable, iExtreme has been detectable, but Light Touch has, for the most part, not been detectable. And the people who have gotten banned for having flash systems have been playing pirated games early, not patching their games correctly, or doing just any other crazy stuff like when I mentioned earlier, ISO modding your games. That could be a real issue, and that can cause some issues, and cause bans on your system and your account and whatever it might be. So when I say live safe, kind of take that into consideration. I will say this, when it comes to playing games early, the fact that the Xbox 360 is really not getting any new releases anymore, that's no longer an issue. That was more an issue in like 2013 and before, but at this point, no, it doesn't matter because there's not going to be any new games to play early. Now let's get into hard modded systems. So you might have heard of a JTAG, an RGH, an RJTAG, an RJTOP, a RGH2, an RGH 1.2, an RGH 1. I'm going to bring this back to basic a little bit. These are all different methods of getting the system hard modded. In the end, all of these mods do the same thing. They allow your system to boot up successfully with a hacked version of the kernel. That's really all they're going to do. So I'm going to refer to this as a hard modded system. But if you have a JTAG, an RGH, or anything else like that, I'm referring to a hard modded system. Now, hard modded systems are what you would more expect from a modified system. This will allow you to run unsigned code, run homebrew, really do whatever you want to on the Xbox 360. I do want to mention, though, that funny enough, this will not allow you to run burned games. So if some people are saying, oh, I'm just going to hard mod my system and that way I can play burned games, you can't do that, actually. They are separate modifications. So you can have a flash disk drive and not have a hard modded system. Or you can have a hard modded system and a stock disk drive. Or you can have both of them. Or you can have none of them. But doing a hard mod to your system is not going to magically flash a disk drive, and it's not going to make that process any easier. Just wanted to let that be known here. Now, when you have a hard modded system, some of the benefits, of course, are you're able to, as I said, run homebrew, you can run unsigned code, you can actually fully modify your games either through modified files or doing real-time editing or real-time modding through your computer to your Xbox 360 over your local network. And you can play games off a USB drive of some kind. Now, you might be saying, wait a minute, you just said that you can do that on other systems. I did. But this allowed you to do it before Microsoft implemented it. But it's 2018. I mean, that shouldn't make a difference, right? It does make a difference, though. The reason why I say that is because you can still play games off of a USB drive of some kind, whether it's a flash drive or a hard drive or whatever it is. You are able to do that easily enough. But the cool thing is you can actually rip games over and not use your discs after that. So if you're wanting a system that's going to have all your games available as soon as you turn it on, and you still want to have your discs and you want to keep them nice and crisp on the shelf, and this is especially important for people who don't want to play on Xbox Live. If you're mostly a single-player gamer such as myself, you really don't want to get online or muck around or do any of that other fun stuff, this is actually a really good option for you. And the reason being is if you want to, once you hard mod your system, you can take your games library, rip it over to an external drive of some kind or an internal drive on the Xbox 360 itself, and afterwards you can use something such as Freestyle 3 or Aurora, which are custom dashboards, and you can launch your games through there. You can launch them all from the internal drive or from a USB drive without the need to put in the disk itself. Now, for the whole live safe question right here, I want to address this. For the most part, I'm going to say these are not live safe. You see, the way you do get these online, and I'm just saying I really don't endorse this, but it's such common knowledge now, I really have to touch up on it, because if you don't hear it from me, you're going to hear it from someone else. I mean, this is what it's known for now at this point. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on how you look at it, once you have one of these hard modded systems, you cannot just take a cable and hook it up to your system and connect to Xbox Live. It will fail, or if you somehow connect, you will ban your system. You have to use something most of the time called a stealth server. What this is this is another server, and it is a third-party service that most of the time you have to pay for, that essentially goes between your Xbox and Xbox Live. You see, on Xbox Live, they don't want these hard modded systems on there. Your system is going to fail the checks that are required for a retail system to pass and get online. So in order to bypass that, what you essentially end up doing is you have to then connect out to this stealth server, which then bypasses all the checks and does everything for you, and then connects you to Xbox Live. Think of it as a proxy service. It's pretty similar to that. Now, stealth servers are a dime a dozen. There are a few good stealth servers out there, and by that I mean the ones that you can stay on for months and months and months and not get banned. And then there are a lot of other ones that are just kind of cobbled together spaghetti stolen code that you're probably going to get banned within a day or two if you get on there. And if you do get banned on one of these systems, you can change out the KV, otherwise known as a key vault, and change it out and get your system back online through that stealth service. So really here what I'm saying is, yes, you can connect these to Xbox Live, but it's going to cost you, and it's still not live safe by any means. And even if so, even if you do find a server that is super reliable and you've been online for 6 months and you have not gotten banned or anything, I would highly recommend to you, do not put an account on that system that you care about. Don't do it. Don't do it. You still run the risk of getting you still run a high risk of getting a ban on there. So really just keep them separate. And you also might be asking, well, why would you want to get online with a hard modded system? The answer is simple. For the most part, you're really going to get online if you want to mod your games online. I myself don't condone that, but if that's your thing, so be it. I'm putting the information out there. It's already been out there, so do what you want to with it. So you've seen all this stuff about hard modded systems, you've seen what they can do, you've heard it from me, and you're thinking, awesome, I want to get an Xbox 360 and I want to hard mod it. Or you want to get a Xbox 360 that you already have and get it hard modded yourself, or do it on your own. Well, this is where I have my recommendations as well too. As I said, the fat Xbox 360s are going to be easier to hard mod. I'm not saying the hard mod's easy to do by any means, but they are going to be easier to install a RGH of some kind and do all that other fun stuff on. And really, all of them are going to be available to do that, except just make sure you're getting one with HDMI. The reason why I say that is the ones that do not have HDMI, if you get one that doesn't have HDMI, it's most likely going to be a Xenon, and Xenons, let's just say don't hard mod them. Just don't hard mod them. I'm just going to say that. That's why I would recommend get a fat Jasper Xbox 360 if you do plan on modding. The drives are going to be easier to mod, the console itself is going to be easier to hard mod, and on top of that as well too, they're pretty well supported. They're going to be hardy systems, and you should be good. You should have a long life with your system there. Now, great, I didn't get all the way through the video and I ended up grabbing a Slim. What am I going to do? Well, these are also moddable as well too, aside from one variation. You see, the Trinities are also very trusty systems that are easy to hard mod. Coronas are going to be harder. They're a bit more stubborn, but you can do them. I don't really recommend them, but you can still do them. But the last version of this, which is not pictured here, but the last variant, the last motherboard, is the Winchester motherboard. These ones, you cannot hard mod. To date, right now, there is no public way of hard modding or flashing the disk drive, so those are just good 100% stock systems. In the future, perhaps we're going to get a method of flashing them or doing hard mods that's going to be public, but until then, no. If you have a Slim, I'd absolutely recommend getting a Trinity motherboard. Now, remember the original Xbox backwards compatibility program that I mentioned? The one that works, you know, as you take a original Xbox game, you pop it in your 360 and you can play it? Well, there's a good amount of games from the original Xbox library that work on your 360, and a good amount of those games work pretty well. But there's also a big chunk of games on the Xbox 360 that don't work because they are blacklisted. Well, if you have a hard modded system with a few files and some magic and really just running a program or two, you're actually able to fix the compatibility on there, which means that you can whitelist it so that every single original Xbox game works on your hard modded Xbox 360. Now, I say works and I use that term lightly. I should properly say boot. The reason why I say that is because there are some games that did not work prior that once you install these fixes, some games that did not work at all are now going to work perfectly. Some games that did not work are still going to have some graphical or performance issues, but some games will just not work at all. Even with the whitelist in place, they're still not going to work. Now, I myself have had a little bit of experience with this, but I know someone who's had a lot more experience and has actually done a pretty awesome video on it as well too. My friend Modern Vintage Gamer actually went all out and he did this, and I figured I'd have him on so that he can talk about his experience and give some advice on it as well too.
Hey, thanks Mr. Mario. Thank you for asking me to be a part of this video, and hello everyone. I'm here to talk a little bit about the original Xbox backward compatibility on the Xbox 360, and talking a little bit about the hacked emulation that you can do with a JTAG'd or RGH'd modded Xbox 360. Now, I want to say that Xbox 360 backward compatibility was first announced back when the Xbox 360 was launched in 2005. So it was part of the original plans that Microsoft had when they were rolling out the Xbox 360, and it went all the way up until 2007 when it was sadly discontinued. And in that time, there was a total of about 450 or so compatible games with backward compatibility on the Xbox 360, which sounds like a lot of games, and it is a lot of games, but it's only about half of the original Xbox's library, which I think was around 980, 990 or so. The number's not exactly right, but it's around the 900 and something mark. It only represents about 50% of the original Xbox back catalog. Now, that's still pretty impressive, but more often than not, you're going to get into a situation where you're going to put in one of your favorite games that you played back in the day into your 360's emulator, and it's not going to boot. So because backward compatibility was no longer supported after 2007, and I do remember Microsoft coming out and making a statement that it would be the last backward compatibility update that they had released for the Xbox 360, people kind of lost interest in it and forgot about it. So it was more of a nice to have novelty part of the Xbox 360 that was cool, but it wasn't really an essential part of owning a 360, especially considering the 360 is such an amazing machine with so many fantastic games. Thinking about backward compatibility and playing original Xbox games when you have a fantastic 360 at the time with so many awesome games coming out for it, it's a pretty hard sell. And I think that's one of the reasons why Microsoft decided just to stop supporting backward compatibility, because I think they were investing so much time and resources with the backward compatibility team that at the end of the day, there was only about maybe 2% of users that were utilizing backward compatibility. And that number is actually something that's public, that's Microsoft have come out and said in the past, that it was a very small percentage of users that actually used backward compatibility. So I think they decided just to pull the plug in around 2007. So history lesson here, in about 2009 was when the first public JTAGs were coming out for the Xbox 360. Now I say public because JTAGs were, as far as I remember, in the scene, they were kind of already underway, and there were many people actually had JTAGs, but no one had really released it to the public yet. So the original JTAGs came out in about 2009, and then in about 2010 were the RGH modded Xbox 360s. So when the RGH and the JTAGs came out, there were some people that were really interested in seeing how the emulation actually worked with the backward compatibility stuff on the Xbox 360. And as we found out, it's just a bunch of emulator files that sit on the E partition of the 360. So now that we've concluded there's an emulator that runs, it's just a couple of files that run on the partition, people started to realize, well, is there any way that we can remove the whitelisting and allow everything just to run and just remove that restriction on the title ID in order for every game to run on the 360. So the whitelisting was removed, as well as the region checks, so you could play any region Xbox original game on a JTAG or an RGH 360. So with those two things removed, all of a sudden it opened up the door for any single Xbox original game to play on the 360. And suddenly everyone was excited again, and having a JTAG or an RGH 360 was kind of cool because you had this ability to play any original Xbox game you wanted, in theory. Now, the problem is that there's only really I'll say, and I'm being very generous here, about a 75% success rate. There are a lot of games that work, and a lot of them that do work very well, and some of them weren't added to the backward compatibility list, and there were some games that were just about to be released on the Xbox 360, so Microsoft held them back from the backward compatibility list. And games like Gun by Activision come to mind, which runs pretty well with backward compatibility, although some of the animals, some of the elk and things like that you see, they literally just kind of slide across the screen. It's pretty funny to watch, but the game runs pretty smooth other than that. So many of the games were kind of held back intentionally due to licensing issues and not wanting people to buy the original Xbox version when the 360 was released, and Microsoft really wanted to upsell the idea of people moving to a new platform. So there's that side, but there's also the side where the emulation team clearly needed to do more work and make things run better. And some of the games that I'm thinking about that come to mind are games like Rally Sport Challenge 2 that has graphical glitches. So you have your games that don't run as well, and I'm thinking about something like this, which is Midtown Madness 3. This game doesn't boot at all with backward compatibility. It just completely freezes the Xbox and you have to hard reset the machine. And there's also examples of other games that don't work. Tower of Fang, which is another one that comes to mind, that just doesn't load at all. It just locks up the Xbox. And in fact, I think it just It literally reboots the machine, which is kind of cool because I've never really seen a game do that before. Now, on the flip side, there are a lot of games that do run with backward compatibility that weren't on the original list, and some of them run really well, and I don't really know why they weren't included as part of the original list. Maybe they just got kind of lost in the mix, and they certainly weren't games that were trying to be upsold for the Xbox 360. These were just original Xbox games that just, for some reason, just kind of got left behind. And one of the ones I'm thinking about is Otogi 1 and Otogi 2. Both of them run really well with backward compatibility, at least, the first 3 or 4 stages of Otogi 2 that I've played, and it runs perfectly. I can't find any issues with it. Now, I'm sure that someone out there is going to correct me on that, but for me, this runs extremely well. And there's other games that have the same thing, like Metal Gear Solid 2 runs very, very well. I can't notice any difference with the original Xbox version and the backward compatibility version on the 360. But it's pretty simple to set up the backward compatibility with a modified or a JTAG Xbox 360. It's definitely an interesting piece of history that Microsoft was working on. It's fun to check out, and a lot of games work really well. I've played through a couple of games in their entirety using the backward compatibility on the Xbox 360. So definitely give it a go. You really have nothing to lose if you have a modified Xbox 360. It's almost an essential part of setting up a JTAG or a RGH 360 that you have the modified or the hacked backward compatibility files installed. And take a look at my video that I did about backward compatibility on the Xbox 360. I do go into a deep dive and talk about the history of it, the team that developed it and the thinking behind it and how they managed to get the success that they did, but also talk about the technical aspects and how to install the modified files on a JTAG'd or an RGH'd Xbox 360, very similar to what I just mentioned here on this particular piece, but in more detail. So definitely check that out if you're interested. And I did want to say a big thank you to Mr. Mario for letting me on this segment. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this. Check out my channel and check out my videos. And back to you, Mr. Mario.
Alright, so you've talked a lot about the Xbox 360. You've gotten me interested. Where do I order? Where do I mod? What should I do if I want to do these modifications? And if you're not like that, if you just want to keep your system retail, that is totally fine. But first off, when it comes to send-in services or selling pre-modified systems, I don't offer any services like that, so please don't ask me about it. I'm not going to do send-in services. I'm not going to be selling off pre-modded systems. I don't have a shop or anything else like that. I enjoy doing this as a hobby and on YouTube, so that's not going to be me. Now, for a flashed system, if you want to flash your own system, I recommend go online, look at some good tutorials, really see what you're getting into, and see if you want to dedicate and try it yourself, specifically if you have the programs and the hardware and the capabilities of doing it all. Really, as long as you have a decent computer, you're able to. Although I notice newer computers and motherboard configurations are not going to be as good when you're just trying to hook up the system drive directly to it. So you might need to be forewarned there a little bit. But if you feel comfortable doing this yourself, I would recommend giving it a shot. Now, if you want to do a hard modded system yourself, there's going to be a lot more intricacies to this as well. You are actually going to need to solder, so make sure you have a good soldering iron or a decent one. Make sure you have some soldering skills, and if you don't have any of that, I wouldn't really recommend doing it unless you want to pursue soldering as a hobby and some kind of skill that you want. I myself, I enjoy soldering. I like what I'm able to do with it. I find it fascinating, so I prefer to do my own hard mods. But if you're one person where you just want it done on your system one time, you don't want to risk breaking it, you don't want to do any of that crazy stuff, that's completely fine. You might want to look into purchasing a pre-hard modded system, or you might want to look into a send-in service. So whether you're flashing your system or you are getting a hard modded or you're buying a pre-modded system of some kind, what should you look out for? What should you be doing, or any of that stuff? And also, you might be wondering if I can recommend to anyone. I know of people who do send-in services and do all that other stuff. I'm not going to recommend anyone by name in this video. And the reason why I'm going to do that, or I'm not going to do that, is because By the time you see this video, it might be tomorrow, like the day after it comes out, it might be 5 years from now, and the people I recommend might not be doing those services anymore. What I am going to try and do though is I'll try and, find some people that I know who do good work and I can trust them, and I'll probably link them down below in a comment or something so you can check them out if you want to get a hard modded system or you want to do it yourself, whatever it might be. However, when it comes to this, if you have one system, if you're just planning on keeping and getting one Xbox 360 and you don't want to go through any of that, I would recommend doing a service or getting a pre-modified system. Pre-modified system might be a little less fun because you're not going to do all the setup on yourself, but whatever, some people don't want to do all of that. Now, the reason why I'm mentioning that is if you might be a console collector or someone who plans to have a few Xbox 360s for whatever reason, I mean, I have a few right here, so I'm one of those people. If you are doing send-in services or doing any type of pre-modded systems that you are purchasing, this can get expensive pretty quickly. So as I said, if you're planning on keeping one system, I recommend just have someone do it for you. For any of these send-in services, do your homework on them. Look at what tools they use, look at their vouchers, look at their feedback, look to see if they have any proof available, and most importantly, in my opinion, please get pictures of their work and ask them to see if they can provide you with any pictures of work they've done, and even see if they will show you the work on your console once it is completed. Because if a good installer and a trustable installer is working on this, they will not mind ripping open the system and taking a bunch of pictures and even showing a video of your system working. If they refuse to do that, or for some reason they don't want to take pictures of the install and they don't want to show you or anything else, tread away, just stay away from them. Now for my console recommendations, this is kind of starting to wrap it up here where we're going to get into the variant I'd recommend, the motherboard I'd recommend, or any of that fun stuff. If you are planning to get a modified console or you want to get a console and modify either yourself or through another service, the one that I recommend the most is going to be a fat Jasper of some kind, a fat model, and get a Jasper motherboard. Look for that. As I said, you can look at the power plug and you're able to tell what type of motherboard it is. Yes, this might not attract some people because it is the heavier, bulkier, older one, but the reason why I'm recommending this is because it's a pretty hardy system. It's easy to mod if you plan to do it yourself, either through a soft mod like flashing it or a hard mod of whatever kind. But when it comes down to it as well, it might not attract some people because it does not have Wi-Fi. I'll tell you this, if you plan on doing any sort of modding or real-time editing or whatever it might be, you don't want to do it over wireless connection. You want to stay wired, so that should actually be an incentive to find a Ethernet cable to hook up to your Switch or your router or whatever it might be. If you plan to just get a system and you're saying that modding stuff is way too much, I don't ever want to deal with this, I don't plan to ever do that to my system, get a Slim of some kind. These things have Wi-Fi on them, they are smaller, they take up less space, they're lighter, they're going to be much quieter when they're loading up and playing your games as well too, and they're great. And really at that point it's really, do you like the Slim S or do you like the Slim E? In my opinion, my favorite type of variant is this one right here, a matte black Slim S. This is my favorite, and the motherboard's not going to matter. They're all going to be pretty good. They're going to do the same thing. Now, you might be in a third class of people that says, well, all that modding stuff is cool, but I really don't want to do that right now. I want to get an Xbox 360 and just mess around with it and enjoy it for a year or two, and maybe I'll get it modded in the future. What should I get? Well, for that, I would recommend a Xbox 360S, specifically a Trinity motherboard. And this variant is my favorite right here. Again, it is the Xbox 360S system, it is matte black, and it is a Trinity motherboard. The reason why I say that is not only are you able to get all the benefits I mentioned of a Trinity, having Wi-Fi, taking up less real estate, less power, being quieter, but on top of that, if you ever decide to modify it, you're most likely for a disk drive mod, you're going to get a moddable drive in one of these. And on top of that as well too, if you ever plan on doing a hard mod to it, the Trinities are quite reliable and really easy enough and straightforward to do. So that is why I recommend a Trinity motherboard Slim if you are going to be planning maybe in the future, maybe modifying your system somehow. Now wait, before we finish up, what about the Kinect? I completely forgot about this, as did most of the general public, but the Kinect is a pretty cool peripheral that you can get for the Xbox 360. There are several Kinect compatible and Kinect exclusive games, and it is a motion sensing camera which you can hook up to the Xbox 360, and you can play these games on. You can also give your system some commands as well too, through voice or motion or whatever it might be, so it sounds pretty neat. Now, this is what I would recommend depending on what system you're getting. If you are going to get a slim system, the nice thing is you can just hook your Kinect up straight away right here through the Kinect port. If you have a Xbox 360 Fat, unfortunately it has no Kinect ports, it just has regular USB ports on here. So you are going to need to get an AC adapter that will go from the Kinect to your power, and then you can power up your Kinect separately and then hook up the data for it through your Xbox 360. So if you do get a Kinect, I'm going to say regardless of what system you get, make sure you try and get a AC power adapter with it, because that's just going to increase whatever value it is, and just in case you have a Fat 360 or you use one, you're able to connect it to that. Now, these things are pretty cheap as well too. I mean, most of the time if you go to a game shop, you can get one for $25 or less. I've seen them go for as little as $5 because they are not sought after anymore at all. But let's be real here. Just let's not kid ourselves, and let's be real here. You aren't going to play any Kinect games. Just be straight up with yourself. You are not going to play any Kinect games.
You ever wonder what the bottom of an Avatar shoe looks like? Well, bam! There it is.
Anyways, this is Mr. Mario signing off. Thank you all for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, a like would very much be appreciated. If you absolutely hated it, a dislike is fine as well, too. And I hope this makes for a good first episode of So You Want a Xbox 360. Except instead of Xbox 360, it's going to be different consoles. If you have any other consoles you'd like me to cover, let me know. I have a few in mind, but I'll also see what people are recommending as well, too.